All right, everybody. It's time to revisit random numbers with a little bit of extra thrown in there. Magnifier. Oh, it's already up. There it is. Okay, good. Now we're set. So, let's talk about random number generation. Remind you a little bit from Java 1 about how that works. Now first, let's get this out of the way. There is no such thing as true random number generation. It's always gotten using some sort of formula or some sort of method. In the case of Java and most other programming languages, it actually uses the system clock. The little clock in the bottom corner, how many milliseconds have passed between now and, I think it's January 1st, 1970, for example. That's a lot of milliseconds, and every millisecond that number goes up, and it uses that as kind of a seed value to figure out what the random number should be. Now, first off, there is a built-in math.random you can import. I personally prefer to use, math.random, the number generator. So let's just go through this real quick. Int rand1 equals math.random times 10. Whoops, let's see, what have I done? Oh, it's missing one's minor thing. Int. And a little bit of parentheses here. Got to make sure I got everything in place. Okay, there we go. Now, what this will do is we'll break it down into parts for you. Refresh your memories. Math.random will give us a number between 0 and 1. So, a number between 0 and 1. And this is just a decimal number, like 0.999534332, da 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 da. Now, if I multiply that by 10, that moves that decimal place over one slot. So if it was 0.9, now it's 9 point something. This int is what's known as a cast. What it's going to do is force whatever is over here on this side, that's why I have these parentheses, so it happens in order. It's going to force that 9 point, let's say, 45 to be an integer. So it's going to cut off any excess decimal places. So in this case, this will get us a number between 0 and 9. Now the reason it will be 0 and 9, let's say it randomly picks a number between 0 and 1, right? It's never going to be 1, it's never going to be 0. Even if it goes all the way down to this. Well, if I multiply by 10, that moves the decimal place here. And if I cut off all those excess decimal places, I get a 0, right? Now what if I got 9, 9, 9, 9, and so forth? Well, I would multiply by 10. That's going to move this decimal place over. I'll have 9.999 whatever. Now the common misconception is that this will round it up. It doesn't. This cuts off any excess, which means all these extras just go away. So the maximum this can be is 9, and the minimum is 0. So whatever I multiply it by, so if I were to, times 100, that would be 0 to 99. If I were to multiply by, let's just pick an arbitrary number, 255, that would be 0 to 254. So if you see how that works. It's always going to start at 0, that's the lowest, and it's going to be 1 less than whatever this is the highest. So if I were to just print this rand1 is, we can easily see that it's 7, 3, 9, 2. And every time I do this, I'm going to get a slightly different number. I might get a few numbers the same in a row, just depends. But basically, it uses the system clock and a complicated formula to figure out what the random number should be. And then, voila, we've got a random number. Now, it's not truly random, like I said, and it's fairly evenly distributed. What that means is basically that you have the same percentage chance to get 0 as you do 9 or 5 or 7. This is important because if we are doing, let's say, dice, for example, to roll snake eyes, there is only one possible way to get snake eyes, and that's to have 2 dice, and each one hits a 1. Now what about if I wanted to get 5? Well, there's several ways to get 5. A 4 and a 1, a 3 and a 2, the other dice being a 4 and a 1, a 3 and a 2. So there's a couple of different ways. There's a higher percentage chance to hit the numbers that are in the middle, like 7 has the highest chance to roll percentage-wise if you do all the calculations for it. 12 and 1 are on the ends of the spectrum, and you only have one possible way to get those. Have 2 6s, have 2 1s. There's no other way to get that. So if you were dealing with dice, you have to keep that in mind. If you wanted your game to be truly random, like you were playing a game with dice, you'd have to, do the calculations if you wanted it to be actually like a dice game. And that's where some programs kind of fail. They just use a regular random number generator, so you have just as much chance to roll a 12 as you do a 5, a 4, and in some games it doesn't matter, but in games of, if you're trying to employ any kind of strategy, and you're trying to use math and stuff like that to help your strategy, then if the random generator doesn't work properly, then you can't. It kind of voids any kind of strategic thinking on your part, or the user's part. So let's take a look. What if I wanted the range, the lower end of the range, to not be 0? So what I'm going to do is just kind of copy this, paste it, and I'll make it rand2. Now I'm going to make a little addition here. I'm going to put plus, let's say 10 at the end. Now what this is going to do, notice that the times 10 is 0 to 9, right? 0 to 9, that's what that is, right there. So, I didn't write a little note there, but 0 to 9. Now, this is 0 to 9, but I've got this plus 10 that happens after all this occurs. So this side will still roll 0 to 9, but then I add a 10 to it. So if I pick a 0, I'm going to add a 10 to that. If I pick a 9, I'm going to add a 10 to that. So it's really just a simple little math calculation to figure out what the minimum and maximum is. The minimum, in this case, would be 10, and the maximum would be, well, 10 plus 9 would be 19. So this will give us this range. If I was, let's say, swinging a sword in a video game, then I'd want the range to not be 0, probably, unless there's a miss or something I need to calculate. But that would be a separate chance. This would be just, in fact, most of these games are just dice rolls for the most part. It's where they originate from, board games and things. I roll a dice. Do I hit? Yes, okay. I roll a dice. How much damage do I do? Or maybe I roll a dice, and if it's high enough, I crit or something like that. That's usually how you do it. If you get a low number, it's a whiff. If you get a middle number, it's normal damage. If you get a high number, it's critical damage, and then you roll to see what that is. Double critical damage, normal damage. There's even some calculation you can do where maybe you glancing blow or give them half damage or something. There's a lot of little math calculations and things like that. So let's take a little look here. Let's say I wanted to get a particular range. So let's say I wanted to do, let's go with 50 to, I don't know, 120, right? Let's see here. All right, let's continue. So I want 50 to 120, right? So in this case, I need to just do a little bit of math. If you look up here, well, let's see, how do I figure out what the minimum is going to be? Well, the minimum, this little plus sign here, will be whatever the 50 is. So that 50 is the minimum, it's going to be plus 50. So I wanted this, then I will basically just do this again. I'll just copy this over here so you can kind of see it. So plus 50, right? That's the minimum. Now, to figure out how to get 120, I'm going to have to do a little bit of simple subtraction. So if I just multiply this by 120, I would get 0 to 120 or 119. I get one less than that. So that wouldn't get me the range. If I multiplied it by 121, I would get 0 to 121, but this 50 throws it off. The plus 50 would give me 50 as the minimum, but then I would get 170 as the max. So what I'm going to have to do is subtract. So in this case, if I subtract 50 from this number, we end up like this. So let's see if this works out for us. If this is 0, well then it will give me a nice little 0, right? Plus 50, minimum is 50. If I wanted the maximum, this will give me 70. 70 plus 50 is 120. So it's just a little simple math. It takes a little getting used to. It's a little bit of algebra, but once you know how to do this, you can pretty much make it do whatever you want. Now, let's go ahead and make a method that does this. So, public static, we'll call this int getRand. And I don't have to give it anything because all it's going to do is return something for me. Let's see here. All right, so it's just going to return math.random. Now, if I want a specific math.random, let's say, I don't know, 0 to 100, then I would just return this. Copy paste. Now, if I want it to be 0 to 100, I can't multiply by 100. That'll be 0 to 99. It's got to be 101, like so. Now, let's say I wanted to set the range in a method. And of course, if I just wanted it to print, I would just have a simple print statement there. Although I can't do it like this. But if I want to return it and use it for something, then I would do this. So it depends. You just print statement instead. If this is a void. Public static int getRand. I'm not sure what that missing @return tag is actually. No idea what that's about. Okay, well anyway, it's working. So let's take a look at this. Let's say I want to customize my damage or something. Let's say I calculate a whole bunch of little things based on strength and their weapon equipment. I get the minimum and maximum damage. So I factor that somewhere else. And I want to give those numbers to this damage method, let's say. We'll just call it getDamage. I'm going to give it the min and the max. And all we have to do is simply just, same thing. Now, I know there's a multiplication and there's a plus. So I know the minimum is going to be the plus. The maximum will be max plus 1 minus min. And it doesn't really matter what order I do that in, but I'm going to have to put some extra parentheses around it. Let's see what an extra here somehow. And I need one there, I think. Let's see. Okay, I think we got this right. So what I've got is, let's take a look at it. Let's say I pass a 5 and a 10. I want it to be 5 to 10, right? We'll come in and plug in and see if that works for us. So at minimum, this is, the max is 10, 11. Now I'm going to subtract 5, which puts that at 6, so times 6. So without worrying about the rest of it. Times 6 gives me what? 0 to 5, right? Now I'm going to add 5 to either side. So I have 0 plus 5 is 5. That's the minimum. 5 is the maximum. I add 5 to that, I get 10. So I would get 5 to 10. It's much easier if you see the actual math. It's just a little bit of addition and subtraction for the most part. But this right here would allow me to set the minimum and maximum to whatever I want. If I want it to be 1,000 and 1,200 or something, I just pass it those numbers and it will give me a random number between that range. So the nice thing about methods here is you can quite literally just customize a method to give you the numbers you need within whatever range you want. Now the trick here though is, there we go. The trick here though is calculating what the minimum and maximum need to be, and that would happen somewhere else. I'm just going to assume we've done that already. You know, character strength, his various stats, maybe the creature we're attacking's defenses and stuff like that. There's a lot of little addition, subtraction, multiplication, you know, type things that happen, division. And that figures out what the min is, and then we do the same kind of calculation to figure out what the max is, and then we just randomly pick somewhere in that range. And voila, you've got yourself a nice little random number generator for, you know, getting damage or for, you know, picking cards or any number of things, rolling dice, several different ways to do that. All right, hopefully that clears up random numbers. And of course, we're going to see those in the coming programs, particularly with methods. Remember, we're still going to see methods. So keep practicing, keep working. If you have any problems, ask me. If you have any questions, ask me. And I'll do what I can to answer.